The Home Guards were considered to be traitors of their country by the militant nationalists. They were generally referred to as the Atashia Bururi, barons of the land, or Kamatimu, the spear bearers. It is these two initial raids that triggered and laid foundation for what was to be the beginning of more coordinated raids in these early days of the struggle. Greatly impressed by these successful raids, Kimathi, with the consent of Madenge and the blessings of the War Council, invited all forest armies to a conference in April of 1953 for the purpose of celebrating these two great victories at Githogi guerrilla camp in Murang'a. This marked the beginning of coordinated efforts of all scattered sections of the forest armies in both Nyandarua and Mount Kenya fronts. It was in this conference that a central command was formally established in the forest with the formation of a new body called the Supreme War Council, the SWC. General Madenge was elected as its chairman and commander-in-chief of all the Kenyan Land and Freedom Army forces in both war fronts, and General Mbarai Kanyu his deputy. Kimathi was made the Supreme War Council secretary, while General China was retained as the chief commander of all armed forces in the Mount Kenya war front. War strategies were evolved and new administrative structures developed at the Githogi conference in order to make the movement's activities coherent. Between April and 12th of June 1953, all raids which had been planned at this conference were executed throughout the Rift Valley, Central and Nairobi provinces, and these were the following. The Othaya raid of 27th May 1953, which was led by General Madenge. Kairodhi and Kariaine raids on 27th May of 1953, led by General Washanga, while General Gikonyo Kanyungu and General Kishohi Ngero raided Musharage Home Guard Post. General Kahiu Itina raided the Gatumbiro Home Guard Post, while Generals Kago Ihura, Matinjago and Field Marshal Kimathi raided the Ndakaine Home Guard Post. General Muhammad Madhu was busy subduing the British militias during the Lukenya raid on the night of August 16, 1953.
Madena, ona menya maro menge, natokugate totige maka inya urage rakoinge, natokugate totige maka inya urage rakoinge. Netwomereirie Madena, ona menya maro menge.
At the beginning, the war effort under General Madenge ran smoothly, but as antagonism between the British and Kenyans in the war front intensified, it became clear to the War Council that a new military leader was desperately required to take over the revolutionary efforts to the next level. Due to the failure of General Madenge as an effective military leader of the Land and Freedom Army, Kimathi was instead proposed and elected as the preferred leader and commander-in-chief of all the Land and Freedom Army forces by the Kenya War Council and by thousands of other patriots at Mwadhe. To the position of Field Marshal, Kimathi was elected. This was on August 16, 1953. This was thanks to his exceptional martial tactics, excellent organizational skills and bravery that he had portrayed in the battlefields. The immediate result of this was the dissolution of the Supreme War Council, which was headed by General Madenge. The Kenya Defense Council was then formed in its place, Kimathi as its president. General Masharai Wakimemia of Murang'a was made the deputy, General Kahiu Itina the treasurer, and General Gadhitu Wawaithaka as the secretary general. General China was retained as the chief commander of all Mount Kenya armies. His generals on that front were Tanganyika, Kariba, Roi, Mwariama, Simba, Martin, Baimunge, Aga Khan, Abasweni, Kamwamba, Githe and Gatunga. The KDC later formed an executive committee composed of 12 members. Some of the well-known members are Generals Kibira, Gatu, Karo, Matenjago, Muraya Mbudhia, Ndungu Gisheru, Mbaria Kaniu, Nyoro Kirago, and Kimbo Mutuku. General Madenge was dropped from the top leadership of the Land and Freedom Army after he declined to attend the Mwadhe Congress and his latter refusal to submit to the decision of the War Council. This was the beginning of a serious fallout between Madenge and Kimathi.
Tũigatire nyakero na rũrĩmĩ tũkiuga marothorwo nĩ mberi wa Kenya. Ngai witũ arĩ o Kĩrĩnyaga thũmbĩ nĩerire Gĩkũyũ na mũgambo kũrĩa guothe.
Due to the increasing conflict between the Land and Freedom Army and the British gangs, mercenaries and militias under the command of a top British colonial military agent, a self-styled General Erskine, Kimathi, assisted by the Kenya Defence Council Executive Committee, decided to form two other operational bodies under the KDC for tactical reasons. This was also to assist the KDC in its military operations. Therefore, the Mau Mau National Archive and the Kenya Young Stars Association were founded. The Mau Mau National Archive was a bureau of research and documentation of the nation's history, where all battles fought and other revolutionary activities were recorded by field secretaries. The Kenya Young Stars Association involved itself with the nurturing of young politicians who would in the near future take over the national leadership roles once the Britons were defeated. The Kenya Young Stars Association consisted of historians and political theoreticians. It was in the same spirit of making the Land and Freedom Army a formidable fighting force to reckon with that on August 16, 1953, the 8 Land and Freedom Armies, the leaders and the areas of operations were identified, namely the Itumandemi Battalion. This operated in Nyeri under the leadership of Generals Kahiu Itina, Kitura, Jericho, Gisheru Ndungu, Ndiritu Dhuita and Abdallah. The Kenya Inoro Battalion. This operated in Kiambu, Ukambani and Narok regions under the leadership of Generals Waruinge, Ole Kisio, Ole Gapian, Nkayak Ole Gadatwa, Serebe Olenkere, Nubi, Arap Chuma, Gishinga, Makimei, Washira, Gadhera, Aga Khan and Vido. Mai Madadi Army. This operated in Mount Kenya Forest under the leadership of Generals China, Tanganyika, Roi, Ashira, Kasam, Kubukubu, Mwariama, Simba, Martin, Baimunge, Gatunga, Batabatu, and Githe. The Mburu Gebo Battalion. This operated in the Rift Valley under the leadership of Generals Kimbo, Gateru, Muraya Mbudhia, and Baria Kaniu. The Kenya Revelation Battalion. It operated in Nyeri countryside under the leadership of Generals Kariba, Ndaya, Mukura, and Kamami. The Gikuyu Iregi Battalion. This one operated in Muranga under the leadership of Generals Matenjagu Nganga, Kago, Ihura, Nyoro, Karuri, Gikonyo Kanyungi, and Gishohi Ngero. The Town Watch Battalion, which operated in all urban centers under the leaderships of Generals Enoch Mwangi, Mohamed Mathu, Mwangi Toto, Ogutu, Kariuki Chotara, and Kareithi. The Gikuyu and Mumbai Trinity Army. This one composed of all individual Kenyans who sympathized and supported the Mau Mau movement in any way possible, and the best known supporter was Chief Mukudi of Western Kenya. General China later formed a 9th Battalion named the Heka Heka on the Mount Kenya front for tactical reasons. Its generals were Abasweni and Montgomery. Once the 8 armies were identified, Kimathi, assisted by the 12 members of the KDC Executive Committee, worked tirelessly to consolidate the armed movement in the forest, reserves and the towns.
Having failed to exterminate the Land and Freedom Army militarily, and the consequent refusal of Kimathi to surrender, the British, through the colonial government system, began strengthening the hand of the moderate parties. This it did by lifting the ban on formation of political parties in the country, with militant nationalists either in the forest, concentration camps, or dead. Indeed, forceful physical occupation was at its last days here in Africa. This was the consistent motivation that made the British yield to formation of African political parties at the district level only.
The truth was that by the 1930s, looking after and defending such a huge empire was becoming difficult. A large part of the Navy was employed to protect its far-flung territories, and a third of Britain's army was tied up in India alone. People in the empire were beginning to question Britain's right to rule them. And threats of this nature were dealt with harshly.
The motive behind the formation of African political parties at the district level only was to foster and deepen sectarianism, sectionalism, and tribalism among Kenyans at the expense of nationalism. Divide and rule was threatening unity of the African people. After the lift on the ban, in December 18, 1955, Kenya African National Congress, KANC, later Nairobi District National Congress, was formed by CMG Agwins Kodek. Among other district-level organizations that emerged were the Nairobi People's Congress, the Mombasa African Democratic Union, the Kisii Highlands Abagusi Association, that is in South Nyanza, the Taita African Democratic Union, the Nakuru African Progressive Party. Central Province was not allowed to form any political party. This, however, led to formation of militant underground movement called Kiama Kiamboinge, Council of the People, CP. Kenyans were determined to fight to death for their land and freedom. In any case, other armed conflicts in the continent had been inspired by activities of militant nationalists in Kenya. In 1954, the Algerian War broke out. In 1958, open war also broke out in the Congo. Days of imperialism in Africa were coming to a close.